guys, it's Kelly Latevola here, and I'm back with another video for Waffle Flower. So today we're going to be using the Peony Bouquet and then the Oversized Thank You. I thought I was going to use the stamp and the die, but I actually only ended up using the die, but the stamp set's still awesome. So here I'm working on Canson watercolor paper. We're going to be doing lots of fun things with these two cards. And the first thing that we're going to do is stamp the image, the large bouquet, on watercolor paper and then heat emboss in white. And it's because we're going to be doing a bleaching technique. It's like watercolor bleaching. It's been a really long time since I've done it, but I love it with large floral stamps. They're super easy cards to do that have a very large impact, which I think basically more bang for your buck, right? So here I'm just standing up to make sure I get really good pressure, and then I'm going to go ahead and take this out of my MISTI and then just sprinkle on that white embossing powder. You just want to make sure that you're covering everything with a large image. Sometimes you got to turn it this way and that way to get powder all over everything. And then when you're heat setting it, so while I'm doing all of this prep part of it, I already have my heat gun on, and this is just to limit the amount of warping to my paper. Thicker paper is less likely to warp, so watercolor paper usually isn't problematic, but for your lighter cardstocks and stuff, it's just something good to keep in mind. When you're doing the heat embossing, make sure that you're moving the heat gun all over the paper, and then you want to make sure that you heat everything until it's smooth. There shouldn't be any powder left. There should not be any gaps or splotches. It should all be just smooth, melted outline. And then here, it's hard to see because it's white on white, but I've done 2 of them. And this is because here's where the fun differences come in. So we're going to do one background with Distress Oxides and one background with Distress Inks. These are all of the same colors, okay? Everything the same, except for one's Oxides, one's Inks. I'm going to start with the ink, and then I'm going to cover the entire background with my lightest color, which is Cracked Pistachio. I really wanted like a teal green blue kind of vibe going on, and so I'm going to use the evergreen bough, and this is going to come about 3/4 of the way down. The bleaching technique works best on darker colors because we're going to be removing color. So in order for there to be any sort of contrast or to even notice the colors missing, you kind of need a darker background to go with it. I'm adding on peacock feathers, and that will go pretty much just over the floral bouquet, obviously much easier to see now. And then the last color will be the Mermaid Lagoon, which will be my darkest color. And I know you might be thinking, like, that's super blue, and it is, but once you put it on, because we're layering all of those colors and they work so nicely together, you'll see that it really ends up just being more of a dark teal. I like to do all of my ink blending twice. It's just how I roll, because I feel like it just gives me a better impression. So I'm doing that. And then I'm bringing this out. I felt like I didn't have a great blend from one color to the next for my 2 lighter colors. So I just added a little bit more ink there. And then this one is done. Because watercolor paper is made to not absorb the moisture right away, that's why your watercolors move so beautifully on top of it. They do stay wet a little bit longer. So careful with those fingertips because you can leave fingerprints. So here I'm going to do the same exact thing. This is just with the Oxides. I know that people sometimes have difficulty getting regular Distress inks to blend. If you do, try doing it on watercolor paper or Bristol, because it really does blend much easier with all of that pigment sitting right on top. Now you'll notice if you've never used Oxides before, the finish is a little bit chalkier, so the color won't be as bold. And that's totally okay. It just depends on what kind of look you're going for. I just wanted you guys to kind of be able to see the difference between the two. But like I said, all the colors are the same, even though the cards will look different. The other thing with Oxides is lighter colors will sit on top of darker colors. So your blend of one color into the next might not be as smooth. as far as like the transition. You might have to work a little harder at that. Not at the ink blending though, because Distress Oxides go on beautifully. But you can see kind of like that line of demarcation there at the bottom, which I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the first one. Like I said, I just like doing them twice. I feel like it gives me a much better blend. So yeah, so that's that. And then once those are done, we're going to add some shine and interest to the background. So I'm using a number 2 round brush. First things first, just clean water. And you'll see that both of them will bleach out from the background. It's up to you how long you want to let them sit. I let mine sit for about 30 seconds. I had to cut that out because I don't think you want to just look at the same screen for 30 seconds. But then I just go in with a paper towel and blot up that clean water. And you can see the one on the left is the Distress ink and the one on the right is the Distress Oxide. It's a little more obvious with the one on the left-hand side with the Distress ink just because those colors are a little bit darker. Of course, I had to add some perfect pearls because shine, shimmer, glitters, you know, I shouldn't have to explain that. We've been friends long enough. You know how this rolls. And then I'm just going to spatter that on the background. And the reason I do this with the spattering after I blot up the water is because if this lands in the water, then all of it will be shimmery. There'll be no difference. This is something new and fun, isn't it? This is actually mica mist from Nuvo. So it's glittery and shimmery like the Perfect Pearls, but it actually has some color in it. So this one is called, well, I'm probably going to butcher it, my apologies, Barrel Swirl. And it's just a really pretty, like, kind of seafoam green color, which I thought would match really well. And now we're on to the bleaching. So the way the bleaching works is I just going in with clean water and I am putting it only in the areas where I want to remove color. So for me, that is my stamped image. I'm just letting it, you know, I'm putting the water on, I'm letting it sit for a second, and then I am blotting it up. And you'll be able to see the image gets much lighter just where we've removed the color. So I started with the Distress Oxide one. And I will tell you that this one stains a little bit more. It stains that watercolor paper a little bit more. I think just because it has pigment ink properties. So it's substantially more opaque than a regular Distress ink. Still pretty, just a little bit, the bleaching technique is just a little bit more subtle on this particular type of card. So yeah, I think that it's super fun and a way to just get, you know, a little bit more out because you have these beautiful bouquets that stand on their own. They're very detailed and those images can stand by itself. You can do a monochromatic card with no issues. So this is the whole bleaching technique done on the Distress ink, and then I will move, or I'm sorry, Distress Oxide. My apologies. And then we're going to move to the Distress ink one. So here, again, just putting down the clean water, and you might be saying to yourself, Kelly, that leaf is all white. And it would appear to be that it is all white, but there's actually little cracks and crevices that have the Distress ink in them, and that's what I'm trying to pull up. They're much easier to see on the larger flowers. This does pull up a little bit cleaner as far as removing the color, but it certainly isn't an enormous difference. So if you like the finish of an oxide better, that chalky, more subtle, like matte finish, then you can totally do that and have no issues whatsoever. This just doesn't stain as much. It doesn't stain the paper as much. So just going to go through and do all of this one as well. I like working with a number 2 round brush, but if you're more comfortable with a bigger brush, that's totally fine. You could actually do all of this at one time. You could add water to the whole image at one time and then just sap it all up in one fell swoop. I just like working in sections. The last kind of spatter that I'm going to add is actually white acrylic paint. And that's because I wanted something that would kind of carry that white embossing. You can do this with gouache. White acrylic paint is 59 cents and it's super cheap and it lasts forever. So I have it in my house and so that's what I'm using. And I'm just using a acrylic block to spatter that on. Once everything is dry, and please let everything dry so you don't ruin your beautiful markers, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to add a little bit of a drop shadow. I like to add my shadows as if my light source was in the top right-hand corner, so that means all of my shadows will be in the bottom left. There are two options for this. I'm showing you the gray because the gray will go with any color. So no matter what color you choose in your background, you will be able to add your shadow with gray, and it won't look weird or off or any of those things. You can shade just about any color. The only one that has ever really given me a little bit of trouble is like a hot pink. The hot pink, for some reason, I struggle with. I'm also going to go in and add a little bit of shading in between these petals with the same markers. But I will caution you that if you repeat, when you put down the shading, you're going to color your embossing. Just FYI, because alcohol markers color pretty much anything. So when I go over it with my lightest color, it will pick up most of the darker color. So I'm not really concerned about that. But if you continually scrub over that embossing with your alcohol marker, whether it be Copic or Nuvo or Spectrum or whatever you got, you will start to eat away at that embossing powder. And so you risk ruining your nib and your embossing. So just be aware. Be as quick as you can about it. The other option is if you do have markers that match, this is actually my preferred, is to use the same color family to add the shadows. It just seems to make it pop a little bit more. And so I just picked some blue greens and I'm doing the exact same thing down to adding the shading to the flowers as well as the drop shadow. Adding the shadow will bring the flowers forward so that they're, more sitting on top of the background instead of within the background. So once that's done, y'all are going to think I'm out my mind, but I'm not. I'm going to cut through this. I'm going to do some inlay die cutting-ish. Like that. Like inlay die cutting. Anywho, I'm going to cut out this very large thank you. And then I'm going to poke out all my pieces parts and I'm going to save every bit of it. Because I want to cut the thank you out in, I want to put it back in. So I want to cut it out, pop it up, and then put it back in. So for one of the cards, I'm going to use the actual cut out piece that I'm the thank you, so the positive of it. For the other one, I'm going to change the color of the thank you. I'm still going to do the inlay die cutting, but I'm going to change the color of it. I did choose to pop mine up with multiple layers of cardstock. So I just die cut multiple thank yous in different colors. For the one on the left, I'm doing gray, and for the one on the right, I'm doing white. But you don't have to do that. Inlay, you can just inlay it and you'll still be able to read your sentiment altogether. So yeah, what have I been doing? I feel like I haven't done a video in 100 years. When I sat down to do the voiceover, I was like all discombobulated because I didn't even know what was happening. Just lots of crazy things going on. I went out of town to see my girlfriends for a little bit, which was super fun and wonderful. But like, you got to prep for that trip for days. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Not just with card stuff, but house stuff and work stuff. And to just make sure that I can go, when I go away, I don't have to be doing something every single second that I'm there because I have deadlines and things like that. There are a couple of things that I had to take care of, but it wasn't anything that really took away from my trip. Side note, back to the card. So you can glue all of your pieces together, all your thank yous together to give you that hefty cardstock and lift it up. The reason that I chose not to is because sometimes when you glue them all together and then you try to put in the background pieces, it can get very difficult to fit them in because now they're trying to slide past like 4 pieces of cardstock. So I did the first one, inlaid my background, and then I'll put the other ones on top. And that's just was easier for me to make sure that those things are working. So yeah, so I went away for a weekend. We're coming up on our Halloween party for our youth group that is this coming Sunday. So there's lots of stuff to do with that. We made the cutest little wine glasses. You could Google them. They're like DIY Halloween wine glasses, and like one's a witch and one's a mummy and one is a ghost. No, the ghost is the mason jar. That's my apologies. And one is Frankenstein. They're just super, super cute. And so we're going to do those and glitter spiders, just like the foam balls with the pipe cleaners, as our centerpieces for the Halloween party, because we have no money and we needed to make cheap centerpieces. So we used that as one of our youth group activities, actually. And then it was kind of like two birds, one stone, which is good. Speaking of Halloween, I cannot remember if I told you, Peanut wants to go as a shark this year. And I don't know how I feel about that, but when I asked him what Mommy was supposed to go as, he told me I was supposed to go as bait. Yes, shark bait. And so when I asked for clarification, he told me I was supposed to go as a fish. So doing some online research and looking for a fish costume, back to the card. So here I'm not using this piece, but you could easily throw this on just a card stock background and totally make a card out of that. I'm going to add some rhinestones. But anyway, I'm supposed to go as a fish. And so I looked online and found some cute ideas, and I'm actually going to make it. So stay tuned for that news, because you know it's not going to go well. But anywho, these are both cards. I hope they gave you some good ideas for things you want to try, whether it's the inks, oxides, bleaching, inlay. We had a lot going on today. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye.